Here are some business lessons that I've learned since going self employed, and I've also included some background imagery of just an average day in the life. My first lesson would be to control your moods, something that Alex Hormozy says, and it really sticks with me here, is when you wake up and you're just in a really bad mood. But if there's no reason to be in a bad mood, he says, just be in a good mood. And it sounds very, very simplistic, but I think the crux of it is if you can just wake up in a bad mood and you can just decide to be in a bad mood, then you can also just decide to be in a good mood. If there's no actual reasoning or if there's no real reason why you're in a bad mood. And I think just going through day-to-day life, especially as you're trying to build a business, with that in mind really helps because there's been a number of times where I've been in a bad mood and I've had that in my mind, and it helps you just change the day into a good day. And if you can't do that, if you find it just difficult to, which I think we can all relate to, at least try to reduce your mood's ability to control your output. So, sure, I might be in a bad mood, but it just means I'll be in a bad mood whilst doing the work. Not that I won't do the work that I need to do. Maybe Maybe I'll use that negative energy. Maybe I'll listen to some rap music or some drill music and channel that energy the same way you channeled your aggressive energy when you're boxing. And I think that's super valuable when you're building a business because you have to be resilient. And even if you are in a bad mood, you can't just let a bad mood dictate whether you're going to produce an output, especially if people's money is on the line. My next lesson is that everything will take 4 times longer than you expect it to. Just as an example, acquiring clients will take much longer than you think it will. By now, probably I expected to have 2 or 4 clients, and I'm sitting here having had acquired just one, right? And obviously, things ramp up as the further you go along. The more, if you get 2 clients, you might get referral from one of them, three, four, you might get a referral from three of them, so things do ramp up exponentially in theory, less linearly. But either way, everything will take so much longer than you expect it to. And just be okay with that. And on a similar point, everything will be 4 times harder than you thought it would be. There will always be challenges and roadblock blocks cropping up, even on things you thought would be easy, like, oh, I'll just set up the conversion tracking on my Google Ads. Like, surely that shouldn't be too hard. They just open up a web page and, then I track that. But, that won't work. And then you'll try and create a funnel, maybe with Go High Level, and there'll be some hosting issue. Just there'll always be 4 times as many challenges as you thought there would be. And that's just a lesson I go in with everything that I do now. It's just that, okay, this should take 2 hours, but it's probably going to take four, six, or maybe even eight. It's the same when you go to fix your car, you think, fine, this will just take an afternoon, and it ends up taking all day. Something else to learn is that no one is going to save you, right? No one's going to put in the work on your behalf. It's just you. Even if you have a business partner, they have their side of their work, you have your own side. And with employment, it feels like there's almost always someone who can bail you out. There's always someone else to blame. But here, there's no one to blame but you. If you haven't got many clients, it's probably your fault. You haven't put in the reps that you needed to. Just as an example of this, I got food poisoning, right? I ate a pound of beef that was 20 days out of date. Don't ask why. But anyway, so long story short, I was throwing up all night. And then it dawned upon me that I had my first sales call that morning. And that was my first sales call I had gotten through Google Ads. Now, I was in no state to take that call, but I had no state to be doing anything but vomiting and sleeping, right? But I still had to rearrange, and discuss with that prospect. So even at your weakest moments, the business will still be on your mind, and it's only you who can fix that problem and rearrange that meeting, or even just go ahead with the meeting if you're able to. I also have learned that execution is more or just as important as planning. Before moving to Guatemala to sort of work on this business, I gooned so much over what the business might look like, so many thoughts flying around my brain, so many ChatGPT conversations. But at the end of the day, it all just came back to sitting in front of a laptop, putting in the reps, and doing the work. No amount of ChatGPT planning about my percentage likelihood of success was going to send the messages and make cold calls for me. So, really hit me that there's a time and place for planning, of course, and strategy, but execution is more important. You can plan all you want, nothing will happen. You need to execute. Sales is hard as fuck. Sales will bring out all the flaws and all the issues with your business plan and what you're trying to sell, especially once you're trying to take people's money. People can hear you blabber on about your product and they're like, oh yeah, that's nice. But as soon as you say how much it is and ask for their details, any small mistake will just fuck you. A good example of this is I called someone and it was 5:15 p.m. on a Friday night. And yes, I know that was a mistake. And he immediately picked up on it. I said, "Have I caught you at a bad time?" And he said, "Well, it's 5:30 on a Friday night. What do you expect?" And as soon as he said that, I realized it was a mistake. Um, I hadn't realized the time. And yeah, people. It was one mistake, but people will pick up on it, especially when you're bothering them. I had another sales call and he mentioned a competitor's model of advertising, which I had just never heard before. And he just absolutely cakewalked me. He ran straight over me. I didn't know what to say. And he was like, "Well, how can you charge three times more than this competitor?" And I'd never heard of this model before. I didn't realize it wasn't a high value offering like we offered, and I had no rebuttal. And yeah,
You
he
can
just
cut it.
cakewalked me.
Nice.
You cannot have an ego. You have to be willing to look embarrassing, right? You have to be willing to look like an idiot and almost beg. Sometimes you may need to ask friends for whether they know anyone interested in your product, right? And you may need to look stupid on camera and pay down your ignorance debt on these sales calls, right? And get steamrolled by a client. Even that client call that I mucked up that I mentioned previously, that was valuable because I came off that call, I did a lot of research on the competitor, and I realized that actually our product, there's a reason why our product was more expensive. And in the end, I gave him a text back to say, look, just explaining the difference between the products. I know I should have said that on the sales call, but now next time someone brings that up, I know exactly what to say. I think also having a mentor helps so much. Personally, I don't pay anyone or get coaching. Maybe in the future that would be a good idea, and I'll definitely give it a go. But I'm just lucky to have friends who are older than me and people that I talk to who are more experienced in life. Just two, for example, George and Ari. They're super helpful friends. They might be watching it now, and when I met them, I never knew they might be really helpful in sort of helping sculpt my mindset and business plan. But just having people you can chat to about your business who've got more experience than you is so valuable. And it's key that you bounce ideas off them, discuss these things, and actually listen to their suggestions, not just blindly think you know better. You should celebrate your wins. For our first ads client, whenever we got our first double leads. So we got 2 leads in one day for this client. I was so excited, and it's so important to ride that energy. We got lunch, and that was our little celebration. It doesn't have to be something massive, but just anything to keep your spirits up, because it can be grueling, and there will be days where it's shit. And if you can't celebrate with that client, I immediately sent him like a DJ Carly meme saying like another one, and he was as excited as I was, because we were making him money. So why not celebrate it with him? And I think the last thing to say is just control your environment to get the best outcome out of you, to get the most productivity. Just as an example, I live here with my brother and his dogs, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of barking and there's a lot of stuff going on. It's quite a high energy environment, right? Especially with the puppies around, and it just came. I work in the kitchen. It just hit me one day, like I'll just constantly being distracted by all this barking and whining and stuff. And I realized, there's a spare room. Like, why am I in the kitchen when I can just go into a spare room, shut the curtains, and be productive with no distractions? So I just moved my table into that room. So whatever you can do to control your environment to become more productive and get more output, then do that. And yeah, those are the lessons I've learned. If you found any of those valuable, please feel free to subscribe.